Welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of college basketball. Guess who's back? After almost 2 whole years, it's time to cover March Madness with my faithful co-host and longest friend, Drew Westland. How's it going?
Hi, it's been a minute,
It
but this
has.
feels like home for sure. So it feels good to be talking college hoops again. And things are going to get busy, things are going to get hectic, and it's not quite March, but it's pretty much March. So this is
Around the
March.
corner. Absolutely. So, without further ado, let's run it. We're going to start off here in the A10, our first team that we're going to look for in our Best of the Rest episode. St. Louis head coach Josh Schertz. They are a fun team to watch this year. They're one of the main mid majors that is really being talked about quite a bit. Drew, what have you seen with this team in your research?
So the thing about the Billikens, if I'm getting that right, they're the Billikens. Yeah,
They
yeah.
are.
What even is a Billiken? But what is a Billiken? They're a damn good basketball team. They're one of the best mid-major teams that I think you'll see in the bracket. No matter what happens in the A10 tournament, regardless of whether they win or they're out, they're going to be in this thing. Um, they've had a pretty solid regular season the entire way. They've only lost 3 games total, but they've two of their last 3 games have been losses, so they've picked up a majority lately. So they're going to look to turn around entering the A10 tournament. But I mean, they got a balanced attack. They got some guys that are either at above or just under double-digit scorers, and they shoot the rock. At 41%, they share the ball and they run. They run, they get out in transition, they will push the pace, and they will try to score a lot. So that's their bread and butter, and they're going to be a tough out.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, they have five double-digit scores, and there are two more that are just short at 9.8 and 9.6 points per game. So they can score the ball in a lot of different ways. Obviously led by, sensation Robbie Avila, who was known previously from Indiana State. I know him fondly as Rob Wave as his preferred nickname, rather than Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But he averages 12, 4, and 4, and 42% from three. He really is the star of the show, more than just his scoring, the way that he, has the fact that he's the leading assist man, as their center. But you mentioned their three-point shooting. They're second in the nation in that percentage, with 41%. The couple of other big things about them, they are sixth in the country in rebounds per game. Whether that will transition or travel against some of these bigger, better teams is yet to be seen when it comes to the NCAA tournament, but it's a good place to start off from. And they're also not fantastic with holding onto the ball. They average 12 and a half turnovers per game. So against, a higher pressure defense, that's something that could come back to bite them. But on the defensive end, they do average 7.6 steals per game. So we'll see once again if that translates against, higher major opponents.
Well, what's kind of crazy about the A10 is we've never talked about them in all the years that we've done this. And they should have a few teams in the field or at least competing for a spot in the field. VCU is one of them, right? Currently, according to Lenardi, they're sitting on the next 4 out. Their KenPom stats look great. They're inside the top 50 overall and offensively. And they were on a tear, 10-game winning streak before their loss and their fight at St. Louis. So, what we can say about them is that they're a chippy bunch. They have that two-headed monster with Hill Jr. and Djokovic, and they're going to be gunning for at least a slice of that A10 pie, and that's probably what's going to take to make the field, especially with a lot of these Power 5 schools that are currently on the right side of the bubble. So VCU's got some work to do, but there's no reason why they can't make that push into the tournament.
Absolutely. And like St. Louis, they're one of the more balanced teams, coming out of a conference like the A10. And KenPom, they're ranked 45th in offensive rating, 68th in defensive rating, which puts them at 44th overall. So they are not a team to be ignored by any stretch of the imagination. And like some of those better teams in college basketball as a whole, they also have a deep roster. They go nine deep. So they're not afraid to, try to speed you up. They are once again a team that averages 7.6 steals per game, so they want to apply the pressure on you, and really get you to turn the ball over. but they play that fast tempo and utilize their full roster to, make that work across a 40-minute game. Something that also has the possibility of really coming up big for them, as they have two elite free throw shooters in both Hill Jr. and Jennings. You always see that in March, and I'll say this, I'm sure across so many videos, the two biggest things
Make your
are free
damn free
throws
throws.
and turnovers. So, I'm going to talk about
Yeah.
that quite a bit, but those are things that can absolutely turn, flip a game on its head, turn a game around for a team. And in the crunch time, free throws are always going to be super important. So that's going to be very big for them. And moving on to the next team in the A10, you have the Dayton Flyers, who are a familiar team for those of us who have, been big college basketball fans in the late 2010s with the Obi Toppin Dayton team
Indiana
that
Pacers legend Obi Toppin.
exactly that never really got to see, just what they could have been, but they are another solid team again this year. You talk about Ken Palm rankings; they are much more defensive than offensive this year. They have a relatively balanced offensive attack through their top three, but their money is absolutely made on their defense.
So the thing about Dayton is you won't shut up about him, which leads me to believe that when we go to pick these darn things, unless you pick a sleeper like St. Joseph's or George Washington, God forbid, um, Dayton has a solid shot at this team, but they just knocked off St. Louis, who, as we just said, St. Louis is clearly the top dog in the conference.
Yeah.
But after winning 5 of your last six, this is the right time for this Dayton team to get hot. So, I mean, it's a lot of crowded space up at the top of the A10, especially with those three teams. So could be a coin flip with a oddly three-sided coin.
Yeah, very unusual for the A10 and for some of these smaller conferences like this, but
Don't ask how a coin has three sides.
only in the A10.
Dude, don't
Um,
question it. Hey, Butler spent a year in the A10.
I actually didn't know that. Good to
Fun
know.
fact,
You learn something every day.
in between their leap from the Horizon League to the Big East, they spent a year in the A10. So, the more you know.
There you go. But yeah, this Dayton team they're rather volatile, except for the fact that more recently, as you mentioned, they have kind of been on a tear. And getting into, some of these, the actual conference tournament predictions that we love doing for a select few of these conferences. Um, you hit the nail on the head. I'm running with the hot hand. I know that St. Louis has been the top dog in this conference for the vast majority of this year, but they're starting to hit some bumps, and I think that they'll right the ship a little bit towards the end of this year. But anything can happen in these conference tournaments, and Dayton has shown that they have the personnel and they have the very much the ability to take on a team like St. Louis if they're both end up making it their way to the championship game of this tournament. So I'm running with the Flyers.
And you're right, Dayton could absolutely throw a wrench into this tournament, but barring their deep run, I think if they get out early, it's very clearly between St. Louis and VCU. And if you can get in a team's head, if you can defeat them mentally enough to the point where they have to fight you physically, you earn an edge over that team. So shout out my guys in St. Louis. I got to roll with them to win the A10. They're going to be in anyway. So you might as well knock out everybody else that has a chance to get in. Just crash the party, kick the
It
door
would
down.
it would take a pretty colossal collapse at the end of the season for St. Louis to be out of it, and especially if they're then also able to make
Dude, I don't
a
even
deep
think
run
it's
in
going
this
to be
A10
that far.
tournament.
I think they're in. I think they're pretty safely in.
It's hard to tell. You never know what can happen. But you riding with the Billikens, me riding with the Flyers, we shall see how that one turns out. But moving forward to arguably the most dominant or big name of the best of the rest conferences, we have the West Coast Conference, and starting off for them, one of the top teams in the country throughout a good portion of this year. You've got Gonzaga, led by legendary and or just very veteran head coach Mark Few. Speaking
Listen,
of experience, this team
yeah,
has a lot of it.
we can't talk about a best of the rest video and not include the West Coast Conference. We've talked about them literally every time we've done this video, every single one. And the usual suspects are going to show up. Gonzaga, St. Mary's, Santa Clara, those are the three best. And Gonzaga is, I think, the only team better than St. Louis that is a mid-major right now, unless I'm really, really missing something. Um, I mean, St. Mary's is up there, but as far as like a well-rounded team with experience, pedigree, major non-conference wins, a team that you pretty much know what you're going to get until about the second weekend of the tournament, and that's the big dance. But up until then, I'd say Gonzaga is pretty much a lock for about 25 plus wins a year. Right now, they're sitting at 28 with only two losses. And I mean, their only loss was a slip up on the road against Portland, which they avenged
It was an
tonight with
interesting
a
one.
big win
Yes.
at home. So I'm not concerned about them at all. Very veteran team, very experienced. Some names that even I recognize since before the layoff, which is really unusual because, we've been out of it for so long. But we're back, baby. It feels like home. Let's go. I'm pumped. I'm hyped. I had high stim pre-workout far too late into the afternoon, and we're recording this
Still
at
feeling it.
night. Dude, it's like you get the face itches and you're just like,
Raring and
I
ready to
I I,
go.
I digress. Tim, talk about college basketball.
The thing that caught my ears from what you mentioned is, knowing what you're going to get. And for the vast majority of the season, that is really the story of Gonzaga. But I'm not worried about them in this conference tournament,
Nobody ever is.
but there are some bigger question marks with this Gonzaga team throughout the course of the NCAA tournament, mainly with the loss of Braden Huff. He was a major playmaker for them this year, and he's been out with a knee injury for the last like 11 games or so. And there are major question marks about whether he's going to be able to come back for this season. Most people are saying yes, but the question is when. Would it be a mid to late NCAA tournament run? Would they have to get to the second weekend for that to get him back? He is a huge playmaker for him, and I really do believe that he's a big part of the reason why they have stumbled ever so slightly in the second half of the season without him, like in that loss against Portland. So he's a fantastic player for him or for them, and I think there's a possibility that you could see this Gonzaga slip up on or before the second weekend without him just because of the caliber of player that he is.
Well, we got the WCC. You have your Gonzaga on one side. You always have your St. Mary's on one side. They are clearly the second place team here, right at 14 and 2 in the conference, 25 and 4 overall. They're also pretty safely inside the bracket. What we see is very characteristic of these St. Mary's teams where it's defense, 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 especially on the other side of the ball where their offense is pretty slow paced. They're going to slow you down. They're going to try to play at their pace. They're going to control the ball and they're going to suffocate you on defense. But Paulius Morauskas is an elite name, and just based on vibes alone, I like what they got going on.
Absolutely. They're a pretty fantastic team. And you talk about obviously defense being their thing. It always has been. It pretty much always will be as long as Randy Bennett is still at the helm there at St. Mary's. But they're not a bad offensive team. And that's what's really kept them amongst the best in this West Coast Conference, even with, some other teams like a Santa Clara pushing the top of the envelope there. But they're borderline top 50 in offensive efficiency. They are the best team in the country at free throw shooting, which, as I mentioned, is going to be crucial in so many of these games. And just they're very physical across the board. Obviously, that shows up in their defensive presence, but even it helps them on the offensive side of things to have just good positional size across the board. And that has helped them in the past and will help them matching up against a team like Gonzaga should they meet them in this conference tournament.
Well, and that's the most likely matchup. And you mentioned the free throws. That's the yin to Gonzaga's yang, where St. Mary's is the best free throw shooting team in the country, like you said, and Gonzaga struggles, which is
Yes.
I know I did say, you're gonna get from Gonzaga, but a team that's coached by Mark Few that doesn't hit their free throws is very uncharacteristic, at least from my perspective. You think that late in the game in crunch time, Gonzaga is a well-coached team and they're going to make their free throws. This year, that simply just hasn't been the case. Um, so that could bode well in St. Mary's favor if it does come down to those late close game possessions on a neutral floor in the conference tournament and you have an auto bid on the line. But you act like there's not a third team in this conference.
There
Always a
absolutely is.
bridesmaid, never a bride. It's Santa Clara. It's the Broncos. But their only two conference losses so far are to Gonzaga. So they're no slouch, and they do have some pretty good wins under their belt, such as on the road at Xavier, a Power Five win that is pretty big, you know? So it's not like they're not capable of hanging with the big dogs in this conference. It's just, will they, and do many people expect them to? The answer is no. And right now, they're at the last four in. So what they're going to need is to shock some people in this tournament. And if they were somehow, some way able to scrap and be a bid stealer, what a momentum swing that would be for them. But the odds of that happening, I think, are few and far in between.
Yeah, and that's going to be the biggest problem for them because they absolutely can. They have all the metrics, they have all the scoring ability and defense. They're kind of the I would call them the anti St. Mary's just because they kind of, flip the script entirely on the metrics in terms of a, borderline top 25 offense and a borderline top 50 defense. But they are very high paced, fueled by threes, not quite as much percentage wise, but they will put them up. They have five guys on this roster with at least 100 three-pointers attempted.
Hey,
So
man,
they
that's my
will
kind of team. Run
they
down
will
the
shoot
floor
from
and
anywhere,
chuck them, baby.
but that's going to make them fun to watch, and then also makes them, potentially due for a big game if they just so happen to be hot that night. And they absolutely have the shooters to do it. And defense isn't their primary identity, but they love the chaos. They average 9.4 steals per game, and they're very active on the perimeter. So you talk about them potentially being a bid stealer. There's an opportunity, even without a conference tournament championship win, if they win out the rest of the way and make their way to the championship game and potentially lose to like a Gonzaga or a St. Mary's in
Well,
that
that's the
championship game and have
caveat, I
one
think.
signature win, you could
Yeah.
still see them on the borderline just because their wins will speak to their ability, and their lack of bad losses will also speak to just how good of a team that they are. So we shall see how it turns out for them, but they're going to be a very interesting team to watch with how much they have at stake and on the line going into this conference tournament.
Well, you got to get there. You got to get to that conference tournament championship game, which means dethroning one of Gonzaga or St. Mary's along the way. But speaking of this conference tournament, Tim, who's winning this darn thing?
I am all about picking lots of underdogs and lots of feel good stories, but in this one, I have to ride with the big boys. I have to ride with Gonzaga. I've seen too much good out of them, and I've seen too much solid performances throughout the year, even after losing Braden Huff and how they've had to adjust as a team. I feel like they're really starting to hit their stride again in terms of figuring out their identity post Braden Huff, and I feel like they're going to keep that momentum rolling going into this conference tournament. And it may not be comfortable all the whole way, but I trust in their ability, their experience, both as a coaching staff and the guys they have on this roster like Ty and Grant Foster and Graham Ike who have been here before. Those guys, I trust them to bring it home.
You know, shout out the remnants of the Pac-12, Oregon State and Wazoo that have come into this conference. Neither one of them is winning it. And as much as I'd love to pick something that's a little bit unusual like you, I can't do it either, especially for all the reasons that you just stated. When you look at Gonzaga's resume and you see a top 10 win against Alabama and a win against Kentucky and a win against UCLA and so on and so forth, it's very hard to imagine that when the chips are down and it's all in and the game really matters, that they are going to fold to a St. Mary's Santa Clara. I think they got their oopsie out of the way at Portland, but you never know.
There's always something to be said about having that slip up game at the quote unquote right time. And it feels like they had it in enough time to sort of right the ship and, as I said, kind of reestablish their identity heading into the most important time of the year. But moving on to our third and final conference that we will mention as a whole before we get to a couple of outlier teams, the Mountain West Conference. And there's a fair amount of teams that belong in this conversation. But we'll start off here with arguably one of the most exciting and fun teams to watch out of the Mountain West this year, Utah State, led by Jared Calhoun. They are a fantastic analytical team. They're an extremely efficient offense. They average 1.27 points per possession. And they have very high effective field goal percentage and field goal percentage, both right around top 10 in the country. They are just a super fun offense to watch, and they can score it from a whole lot of different places.
So the thing about Utah State is they had a little mid-January stumble, but the Mountain West has been kind of a dogfight all year, and reeling off 8 of your last nine, especially entering the tournament and really sealing that at large spot. Right now, they're projected as a seventh seed, and I really don't see that changing, even if they are, an early exit in this tournament. Because of the mid-major conferences, the Mountain West is by far the deepest that we're going to talk about. We have a bunch of teams on the docket that we have to get to.
Got
Um,
6 in the Mountain West alone.
yeah, which is kind of bonkers because it's deeper than it's usually been. But Utah State seems like they're in a good place. My real concern for them is in the NCAA tournament, not this conference tournament coming up. They really don't have a spot to fight for, unlike these next two teams. And San Diego State, who, we've seen in a Final Four, we've covered in a Final Four, they are on the wrong side of the bubble currently as the first four out. And we talk about the identity of St. Mary's being a defensive team. San Diego State has always been a defensive team as well, and they're inside the top 20 in defensive efficiency. But being a dogfight, things happen in the Mountain West, which is an odd sentence to say out loud, but it's kind of true, especially this year. They had back-to-back ugly losses against Colorado State and the new addition to this conference, who we're going to cover later, Grand Canyon. They've been doing quite well for themselves in their first year, but San Diego State, they are that defensive powerhouse and defense wins championships, and that could again carry them to a deep run. We've seen it before. Why can't it happen again?
Absolutely. I think the biggest why it can't is going to be where is that guy that steps up on the offensive end to sort of bring you to that next level. They had the names are slipping me in terms of some of the guys that stepped up big in that tournament run. They have all the defense in the world to do, like you said, they're top 20 in defensive efficiency, but they're just outside the top 100 offensively. They're a moderately fast team in terms of tempo wise. They're also just outside of the top 100, 101, in adjusted tempo. But they're very balanced on the offensive end, which is great throughout the course of the season. But you see in March, you need guys to step up. You need to have a guy that is going to be your 15, 20 point per game scorer through a couple of games of the tournament to, get you through some of these hard battles. The question is will San Diego State have a guy step up? Because the thing is that their downfall is moving too fast. They still play with a pretty high pace. But when they move too fast, they tend to get caught in high turnover games. They average 12.3 turnovers per game on the season. And that's going to be something that if that is coupled with a mediocre to poor offensive shooting night, it could be their downfall real fast.
Yeah, I agree. You said, where's that guy that shows up? Not every team has Braden Smith at their disposal. So, some teams actually have to play together as a team. Not saying that Purdue doesn't, because saying that out loud, it kind of sounds like a dig at Purdue. I promise it's not. I do like the Boilermakers to make a deep run. I just want to get that out right now. Please don't come for me, Purdue fans. But
We'll get to that in a
when you
moment.
have that team ball, I think great things can happen. It's just a question of will it. But we have so many more teams to cover, and the next one up, the Lobos of New Mexico, they've actually made a late push and charged right into the right side of the bubble, which I think is very odd when you look at them next to San Diego State, because I mean they are similar in a lot of ways, but it's a more balanced attack, and having that momentum going into March, charging back into the bracket, especially into the conference tournament, with a conference as deep as this, if you make a deep run, that could potentially seal your spot.
Yeah, I think with them, the thing that's going to be their, calling card and potentially, bring them to the next level to really make sure that they can get into this NCAA tournament is their shooting for their top three scorers. All of those top three scorers shoot threes at a pretty high clip. Those three being Jake Hall, Tomislav Buljan, and Dayton Albury. That's going to be, I know
Nice.
there's some
Nice.
fun
Good
names there for
job.
sure.
I wasn't even gonna
Um,
try it. Props to you for even trying.
you got to make an effort sometimes. But
You're brave for that.
their defense is very solid. The question is going to be, can they knock down enough of those shots, especially from the outside, to keep their offense at a high enough level to beat some of the real solid teams in this conference, especially in this conference tournament, because their defense, they're another one of those high pressure defense. They love causing turnovers, 8.3 steals per game. They want to turn their defense into offense. That's a big calling card for them. But through the context of that offense, they're another team that can get caught up with their turnovers. They average, excuse me, 12.3 turnovers per game. So it's going to be it's really the offensive end that's the question mark for them. And if they can knock down their shots at a reasonable clip, I trust that defense to be able to win most games for them.
Yeah, those are the three teams that are really fighting for a tournament spot. The rest of the conference that we're going to discuss is
Bit more long shots.
pretty clearly outside right now, but could be disruptors going in, being Nevada, Grand Canyon, and Boise State. I think we can all just kind of bunch those together where Nevada and Grand Canyon have been really average. They've been middle of the road as of late. Um,
Sure.
Nevada going 500 in their last eight is not conducive for a tournament push. Grand Canyon in the same spot. They were never really seriously on the bubble, but a Bryce Drew team that could make some noise. We've seen them go in at least into the tournament. So we know they can win it. They have that potential. I just think with the competition leveled up in the Mountain West, as they're not really used to, it's going to take some time to adapt. But I think there's a clear path in future years for Grand Canyon to win this conference. I'm just not sure that's going to happen now. And Boise State, who is really only notable for me because they went into Hinkle and beat Butler, and that made me really, really, really sad.
Yeah, that's understandable. When you group these three teams together, I kind of get, a two and one when I look at this. Nevada and Boise State are both much more balanced teams offensively and defensively.
Oh, oh, oh,
Whereas
oh,
Grant,
oh, 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 oh. Boise State may have beat Butler at home, but they lost to Hawaii Pacific. So,
oof,
who is not a
that's
D1 school. So suck it,
that's
Boise
bad.
State. Yeah, it is bad. That was their season opener, and they lost to
It would be,
I believe they're D2. I
I
believe
think
Hawaii
they are.
Pacific is D2,
I think you're
but
correct about that. It would be wild to see a team that lost to a non D1 college basketball team end up with a bid steal and be in the NCAA tournament because with that loss they are nowhere near sniffing an at-large bid. But with
it
kind of what I was
yeah.
saying, Nevada and Boise State are much more balanced, whereas Grand Canyon, it's all about the defense. And specifically with Grand Canyon, they're a pretty fun and exciting team to watch. Just with Bryce Drew at the helm, they've been a big name in the past. You talk about them making the NCAA tournament. The big question for them, and something that I think is going to be th leaning towards this not really being the year for them. They are a stellar team playing at home. They have an amazing home environment for not being, this major Power Four school, but playing away from home, playing on a neutral court, both in this conference tournament and if they were to make it to the NCAA tournament, is definitely a bit tougher for them. They have, a bit different of a team this year than in the past. They no longer have, like a Ty and Grant Foster where he used to call home previously. All of these teams have their work cut out for them if they want to, go dancing come late March. But realistically, I think out of this group, I would trust Nevada the most between their balance and the fact that they, are led by Corey Camper Jr., who's a pretty elite scorer overall, averaging 17.7 points per game on 45% or 45% three-point shooting on 125 plus attempts. So he not only gets them up there, but he makes it a high clip. So Nevada is kind of that one out of those three that where it's like you have the right amount of balance and you have a microwave scorer who really could turn up in some of these games and reach them to a higher ceiling than we may previously have thought.
Without further ado, who's winning the Mountain West?
It's a tough conference in this one, with how many guys or how many teams that have really the ability analytically, offensively and defensively to put up with the top teams in this conference. I just can't look away from this Utah State team. They've been so exciting to watch all year long. They absolutely have all of the recipe of a extremely solid team. They are right now currently top 25 in KenPom. They're an exciting team to watch with a lot of, electric players, electric scorers. And I think that's going to be enough to get them through this conference tournament.
I like Utah State a lot. That would be the easy pick. Grand Canyon would be the fun pick, and I really, really, really want to, but I know I'll have some more off the wall predictions as we get into March, so I'm not going to go there. Although I do stand by what I said about Grand Canyon in future years. They will win a Mountain West in the next 3 years. They will win a conference tournament in the next 3 years.
I can
That
see
is going
it.
to be my prediction.
With
Not
Bryce Drew
this
at the helm, I absolutely can see it.
not this year, but 3 years down the future, they'll be hoisting a trophy. Um, I like the defense of San Diego State. I think if they can avoid some long, drawn out games, I think they'll be fine. But, there's no replacement for experience. So I like them to win this darn thing.
Yeah, I absolutely get that. They're another very solid team in this conference. So we have now covered our three main conferences and the best of the rest in terms of the conferences we want to take a look at and predict the conference tournaments champions for. But now we have a couple of teams, and honestly more than a couple, that come from a couple of these different conferences that we still think are noteworthy to mention. And that starts us off with Stephen F. Austin. Drew, do you know what makes this team so unique and fun for me personally?
I can't imagine what it is.
Because to me, they're not the Stephen F. Austin Lumberjacks. They're the Northwest Indiana Lumberjacks. They are led in scoring by Maryville's own Keon Thompson, who I played against in high school at Maryville, who
Oh,
ended our
ain't that
senior
cool?
season. And not only just him,
Dude,
but
at least
also
you
you look
got
a
a senior
couple.
season.
But you look a couple down in the scoring slot there. You also have Keyshawn Christmas, Gary, Indiana zone. So you've got two region rats on this team, which is particularly cool to see. So that was something that I thought was
So
very fun
basically, what
to.
you're saying is like the FAU of Dusty May fame, they're going to make a run to the Final Four
Hey,
because that
let's
team also
just
had another region rat. So
exactly.
I think
John
there
L.
may be a
Davis was a
correlation there. Who knows?
Hey, all I know is that we've seen it happen before with a leading scorer and star player coming out of Northwest Indiana. We could see it again, but this team is very interesting and very fun to watch. They're a very guard focused team. Their top four scorers are all guards. They're not necessarily super efficient, but they make the most out of their possessions. They only average 9.2 turnovers per game, which is borderline top 10 in the country. So that's going to bode well for them. And they actually have a top tier mid major defense. Not necessarily top tier in terms of efficiency across the whole country, but they'll cause a fair amount of turnovers, 7.1 steals per game, and they love pushing the ball on some of those turnovers and the more opportune defensive rebounds, even if they're not a super fast tempo team as a whole.
Yeah, Stephen F. Austin is cool, and they have a lot of region rats, but they're not alone in the Southland Conference. McNeese is also rolling strong there. They're right behind them. They're only separated by a game, both overall and in the conference standings. They haven't really lost a step at all, and they're in just as good a position to steal a bid and get the auto bid. Not necessarily steal a bid, but only one of them is going to make the tournament, and it's whoever wins their conference tournament. So it's not a shoo-in that Stephen F. Austin is going to dance. McNeese could crash the party as well.
They certainly could. It really is, down to these two with everything that I've seen. But McNeese State is they're a solid team. They are, once again, another one that's pretty balanced, slightly better defensively than offensively, but they do kind of have a three-headed offensive attack between Johnson, Archie, and Garcia, all scoring in double figures. They're not too much of a three-point shooting team, but they're solid from the free throw line, 75.6% as a team. But really, where they make their money is on the defensive end with double-digit steals per game, which is not very common for any team, mid-major, high-major, power four, non-power four. They average 22 points off of turnovers per game with those steals, so they make up for their lack of offensive efficiency by, getting easy ones against non-set defense.
dude, they're gonna snag your rock and then take it down to the other end and score. But we got a lot more teams to cover. Who we got next?
You have the only undefeated team left in college basketball this year, the Miami University
Yeah.
Redhawks.
Yeah. They
They are,
haven't lost. They
they
literally
have
haven't
not.
lost. I don't care about their conference schedule. I don't care how weak the MAC is. You play who's on your schedule. These bigger schools that refuse to schedule them, you cowards. Respect them.
Yeah,
Respect the
you have to.
Redhawks. They haven't lost. End of story. Period.
No,
And they're going to keep
you
winning
know,
until they do. It is quite literally that simple.
they're gonna keep winning until they lose. That's a crazy concept.
Well, guess what? It's a concept that not a lot of people seem to realize because they're not
This
even the
is true.
highest rated Ken Pom team in their conference.
No, they're not. And that's kind of crazy to me because this team is wild to watch, game in and game out. The three main things, tempo, ball movement, buckets. They have seven players that score in double figures. Seven. They are wild to me in that aspect. That aspect of things. They have the highest field goal and
How
effective
many,
field goal
Tim?
percentage in the
How
entire
many,
country.
Tim?
Seven.
How many, Tim?
Seven.
How many, Chuck? What?
One more
What?
than six, two more than five, however you want to say it, this team can score. And they want to maximize their possessions by playing at a fast pace and limit turnovers, which they do pretty well. They average 10.5 turnovers per game. So really, it all comes down to just how much this offense is clicking. And as of right now, it's clicked just enough to win every single one of their games. The question is when will it falter enough for their defense to not really overcome it?
There's a Purdue mention in here somewhere, but I'm just not sure where it is.
Oh, yeah. If they the thing is the fact that they give up a fair amount of shots on the perimeter. That's where Purdue comes into the picture because they are similar, or sorry, if they match up with a team that gives up shots on the perimeter. That's one thing that's, pretty much a staple of Purdue's defense where they want to funnel you to the three-point line. If you funnel Miami University to the three-point line, they could absolutely shoot you out of the gym.
Is that how Purdue loses in this year's tournament?
It's a big possibility, yeah, if they come up across a team, not necessarily Miami specifically, but a team that has enough shooters and good enough from the outside. That is a pretty cut and dry way to expose Purdue defensively, pretty darn well.
I hope
But
you
this video
realize,
ain't about them.
listen, I hope you realize if Miami University and Purdue match up, I can't pick Purdue. You know that, right?
Well, that's too bad because I have to. But speaking about teams related to Purdue or teams that have faced Purdue, the Akron Zips are a team that actually has come across some high major talent this year. When they came into Mackey Arena and played Purdue, they are an exciting team. They gave Purdue a bit more of a battle in Mackey Arena than even I predicted, and I knew that they were a pretty serious team coming in. They're a top 50 offense in the country, but only top 150 on defense, and that was their downfall in their matchup against Purdue, giving up 90 plus in that game. But their
There's a
overall,
recap somewhere. You can watch
there
that
is a recap
recap.
somewhere.
You
You
can go watch
absolutely
that
can.
recap so Tim can stop talking about it and we could talk about the other teams. Because if you want to learn about Akron, I'm sure Tim rambles plenty in that video, as he tends to do.
Maybe, but this Akron team is so fun to watch and so fun to talk about that I could talk about them for a whole nother 20 minutes. But
You literally did.
I'll save everybody from that one.
We can't have a best of the rest video without me talking about the Missouri Valley. I gotta mention the Valley and the Arch Madness that's about to take place. But the team that's clearly at the top of this conference is Belmont. They've been pretty dominant all year long. It really isn't particularly close.
Yeah, this Belmont team, just like in the past, is going to be an upset favorite to pick because they launch threes. It's a reason why some people got, caught sipping the Kool-Aid in the past, and it could easily catch them again. But they have absolutely still have the offense to pull off some of this. As of right now, we'll see if they get there, but there's a pretty darn good chance that they make it out of the Missouri Valley with how well that they launch threes. They're sixth in the country in 3-point percentage, and fifth in field goal percentage, fourth in effective field goal percentage. So as a top 50 offense in the country, they have the firepower to match up with not only anybody in the Missouri Valley, but potentially whoever they come across in the NCAA tournament. It really just all comes down to how the ball is falling that day. But they are the one thing that I think isn't great for them is the fact that they don't take care of the ball well. So if they run across, a night where they're not shooting the ball as well as they can, and they're facing a defense that's able to turn them over pretty well, we could see that offense come crashing to the ground.
And since we're here at the Missouri Valley Conference, I'm going to mention Illinois State. They haven't had the ideal season. They started hot. It was promising. They were predicted to be a real player in the Missouri Valley, but they kind of started to slump into January and into February, and then they went on the stretch where they're alternating wins and losses, where they won at home in normal, and then they went on the road, and then they lost. Although the night that we filmed this, they did beat Northern Iowa by 2 points. Woohoo. Um,
Yippee.
I mean, sitting at 19 and 11, they're really not projected to make the tournament in any way
It would take
unless
a
they
miracle run.
somehow win in St. Louis. But that's why Redbird Nation, we keep the faith. There's always a chance.
In March, anything is possible. But speaking of a team that anything is possible for, I love this South Florida basketball team. They are a really kind of out of nowhere team to watch, but they all of a sudden are like actually, in this conversation when it comes to the NCAA tournament. They're pretty balanced, but they're super explosive. They're another team that has, five double-digit scorers. They're an elite rebounding team, which is, particularly interesting. Top three in the nation with 43 rebounds per game. And the thing for them is they're not a super crazy efficient three-point shooting team, but they are not afraid to shoot. And they've got two guys, Ennis and Pinion, both with 230 plus attempts. Those two guys take like 70% of the threes in their entire team. So it really kind of comes down to if those guys are knocking it down, their offense is in a fantastic place.
Another mid-major team that I'm really looking at is Yale. Hooray! All hail the lords of the nerd schools. They are the top team in the Ivy League. There's really no one else around them, and they definitely could make some noise. Um, it's Nick Townsend's team. They do shoot the lights out, and they're the Ivy League. They're smart. They better be. That's quite literally how they got there. You don't get to the Ivy League by being dumb. I'll say that right now. So,
Put that on a t-shirt.
dude, you gotta imagine they're a smart basketball team. I think
They
they
are.
are. And who knows? You catch them on a good day, and they could make it to the second weekend. I'm not saying that they will, but when I look at these miracle teams, like, like a St. Peter's, like, me picking Vermont that one time, Yale's on my list. I just gotta like spin the wheel and throw a dart and see what sticks.
They're certainly a team to watch. They're very, very likely to be the team that comes out of the Ivy League going into the NCAA tournament. And like you mentioned, with Nick Townsend at the helm, with John Poulikitis out of the picture now, they still absolutely have the offense to pull off, an upset in March with shooting 41% from three as a team, which leads the nation, by the way. An offense like that and a team that can shoot like that is bound to have an amazing game. The question is can it come at the right time against the right team? Um, they're gonna be a fun team to watch, and I definitely look forward to see who they might get matched up with in the first round of the NCAA tournament should they get there. But that is a wrap on our massive, massive video of Best of the Rest. This is probably the most teams we have ever talked about in this video. It's been super fun to get back into it. But Drew, what is your feels being back?
Dude, it's great. We're gonna get this train rolling and we will not stop until the end of the tournament. I'm ready for a long ride, so buckle up. I think anybody getting to this point of the video is also ready for a long, long, long late February, March, and early April. So let's run it, baby. We're back. We're back. Vibes are high.
Absolutely.
A
Mad
lot of
respect
fun.
to anyone who's gotten to this far. But that's all we've got for today. This is just the beginning. Strap in. There's going to be so much content coming from us over the next month and a half. I mean, we could not be more excited about it. Let us know your favorites out of, these non-power conference teams and who you think will win some of these conference tournaments. But if you want more from us, like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, we're out.
Dude, we're so back. We are so back.
Deuces.